both are rooting for the Netherlands because they like the T-shirts. They were orange and had a lion.
Team Orange, yeah.
Yeah, and they had a lion, and they're little kids. They had T-shirts, so yeah, that was going to be their team.
Okay, so when we start here in a second, we're going to start chapter 5 of the Wisdom of Sirach, or the Wisdom of Ben-Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus, depending on your particular translation. I gave a pretty ponderous, lengthy introduction 2 weeks ago. So that ponderous, lengthy introduction is soon to be displayed on our parish website, and so when it is, you'll be able to listen to that there, and I will not go through it all again now. But I will leave it at, we're dealing with, this book is for the 2nd century BC. It's the collected wisdom of Yeshua Ben-Sirach, meaning the son of Sirach. Yeshua is either transliterated as Joshua or as Jesus, depending on your translation. This is the collection of his wise sayings, some of which were, as we get later in the book, we'll see that there are some very long passages that are clearly continuous passages. Right now, here at the beginning of the book, it's sort of shorter Proverbs type material that's been sort of grouped together sort of topically. But I'll leave it at that for introduction unless anybody has any questions before we get into it. Okay. So starting in chapter 5, verse 1. Do not set your heart on your possessions, and do not say, I am independent. All right, so right off the bat, this sort of calls to mind the parable that Jesus told about the rich fool, right? Who goes and he builds the bigger barns and stores up all the grain, and he says, all right, now I'm set, right? I'm set for life. I can sit back and relax. And God comes to him and says, you fool, you're going to die tonight. You know, and you did all this for nothing, right? So he's saying, no matter how much money you accumulate, you're not a self-made man. Don't think that makes you safe and secure and independent. Verse 2, do not follow yourself and your strength so as to walk in the desires of your heart. Verse 2 is sort of the opposite of all of the graduation speeches I've been hearing online lately, which are, what? Follow the desires of your heart, follow your strength. As Dr. Dwayne Dyer likes to say, follow your bliss. Right? Find what makes you happy and just chase after that, you know. Right? Because where is that going to lead you? That's going to lead you down all kinds of rabbit trails, right? In wisdom, there's 2 ways to go, one that leads to life and one that leads to destruction. Well, chasing after just whatever you might desire at any given point in time is going to lead the wrong way.
It's kind of hard if I follow myself and I'm not really going anywhere.
Well, you're going in circles at best. Chasing your own tail. Verse 3, do not say, who will be Lord over me? For the Lord will surely punish you. Do not say, I sinned, so what happened to me? For the Lord is patient. Say, hey, I got away with it. Right? I did it, nothing happened. Right? This is one of those things that I think some of the lectures we give kids kind of backfire on us. You know? For example, the sex lecture I always got as a kid was, if you go and have sex before you're married, you'll get a disease and die, and she'll get pregnant, right? And all these things will happen all at once. All these horrible things will happen to you. I think if you tell a kid that enough, and then he goes and he does the wrong thing, and nothing happens to him, right? You know, he's like, wait a minute, I didn't get a horrible disease, and she didn't get pregnant, so this must all be, right? And so he's warning. He's saying, not so soon, right? These things have consequences. They don't always hit you right away, right? Sometimes those consequences come a long way down the road, and you don't even think about them at the time you're making the wrong choices. Verse 5, do not be so confident of atonement that you add sin to sin, and do not say, his compassion is great. He will atone for the multitude of my sins. For both mercy and wrath come from him, and his anger rests on sinners. What's that saying? Don't sit back and say, well, God's really forgiving, right? And if I ask him for forgiveness, he has to forgive me. So I can just sort of do what I want, right? Live however I want, wander into confession once in a while, vaguely mention a few of the things I did, get absolution, go back to doing whatever I want. Because it doesn't work that way. Right? That's not how God works. You're not fooling him.
All right, now we talked before. Is that thing on?
That thing is on.
All right, one speaking. Anyway, we talked before class, if you recall, where we talked about the monk who was the alcoholic, but he drank a few less drinks per year.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Is this not the same thing as saying, look, these are the sins that I deal with, and I'm thinking specifically of someone who's on some sort of an addiction. Okay? What they go through, they say, I stand up, I fall down, I get up, I haven't had a beer for 6 weeks, all of a sudden, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, I go in and I catch up on the 6 weeks that I haven't had a beer. Okay? It's an addiction and it's a sin. Okay? We continuously battle sins, much like David. Yes, the Lord forgave David, but he was still the war king. He still could not build a temple. So I'm a little confused that if God says or the Word says I'm going to be forgiven if I throw myself upon the altar of mercy, and I get up and I say, this is who I am, how I am made. There are just certain things I haven't overcome in my personality, in my habits, whatever. I mean, how many diabetics do we know, the doctors, that still drink water? You see what I'm saying? That long time.
Right, but you're talking about someone who's struggling.
Yes.
Right? This is talking about someone who isn't struggling. This is someone who's living their life however they want to. Just saying, I'm going to play this game with God, where I show up and give lip service to confession, even though I have no intent of changing my life, even though I have no intent of trying to follow him. I have no intent of really repenting. I'm just going to live however I want and trust that whatever things I do he doesn't like, he's going to forgive because he's just a nice guy. Right? It's sort of, the point being at the end, for both mercy and wrath come from him. See, this happens sometimes with people who convert from Protestantism, especially to Orthodoxy. Is they come from a form of Protestantism like I did, where you've got a God who's really angry all the time and wrathful and is really into tormenting people in hell for all eternity. And so you come to Orthodoxy and you reject that picture of God. But sometimes people go to the other extreme, where God just becomes this giant teddy bear in the sky who just loves you and is never mad about anything and doesn't have any wrath about anything. Right? It's just, sort of weak and ineffectual. He's sort of the big Dr. Phil in the sky. And occasionally he gives you some harsh words, but it's tough love for your own good. That's not God either. Right? That's just as false a picture of God, just in the other direction.
Well, then we don't know that we're saved or not.
Better live that way. That's why you better live that way.
Well, when the question comes whether we're saved or not, we know that Christ has done his part.
Yeah.
So God's not going to let you down or fail to do his part. Right? If you truly spend your life repenting, he's not going to be like, not quite good enough, plunger, go to hell, right? But at the same time, I don't have a lot of confidence in myself having done my part. So if you want to talk about confidence in salvation, I'm confident that God's going to do his part. I'm confident that when I'm judged at the final judgment, that it's going to be fair.
Yes.
And impartial.
That's what we're asking.
Right. That worries me too. Right.
That's the key.
And I'm hoping I don't get what I deserve. Right.
Don't ever get complacent.
Yeah. But there's never a point where you can just sit back and say, I'm close enough. Right? I'm doing enough. God will take care of the rest, you know. It's good enough for government work, you know. Right? That's the opposite of struggling every day to repent, of struggling with sin, is to just sit back and not take it seriously, essentially.
You talk about the two paths. All right? If I'm on the right path, and I know I'm a sinner, but I'm still trying, you know, it's to me, that's part of the struggle. You're never going to be completely right, because first off, you're a human being, and we're all dumb in the dirt when it gets down to it. But I mean, the way I look at it is if God sees me every day praying and saying, God, you got to come in here and help me out. I know yesterday I went hog wild and give somebody a lip lashing that they should have never got. But, you know, when I get to that point, you got to stick something in my head and say, now, David, you got to stop this. And if I listen to him, usually he'll do that. But to me, I'm always struggling with that. Can I know I made a mistake. Can I go on? Or do I just go ahead and fall off on the right-hand side and tell everybody to go to hell and start having a good time?
Well, that's the point, is that God honors our struggle. He honors our effort.
Okay.
Right? Now, that said, we got to be honest about how much effort we're really putting forth. Right? You know. And how much of it, again, is, you know, there's a big difference between, a lot of times, as we're going to get to here shortly, between what comes out of our mouth and then what we actually do. Right? It's real easy to say, oh yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I know I shouldn't do that, yeah, I'm going to try not to do that anymore. And it's another thing to actually struggle with sin and actually try to do better. Those are two different things. And so again, what he's shooting at is, you can't play games with God with the lip service. Right? It's, you know, it didn't work like magic then. It wasn't, I can go out and do whatever I want and then just go offer a sacrifice tomorrow and then walk away and say, okay. You know, I can go and do something I know is wrong and then just, oh, okay, but God has to forgive me because I sacrificed him a sheep. Right? Or today, I went and did something I knew was wrong, but then I stayed after Vespers and didn't mention that, but I mentioned some other stuff in my confession. So, you know, I got absolution, so I'm clear now. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Right? God doesn't, we try to play games with God, but he doesn't play back. Right? He doesn't play ball when we try that. Verse 7, do not delay to turn to the Lord, and do not put it off from day to day. For suddenly the wrath of the Lord will come forth, and in the day of vengeance you will perish. Right? So this is, I think, another piece to that. Don't say, oh, I'll get straightened out tomorrow. Right? Now it's time to be young and have fun and drink Pepsi and sow my wild oats. Right? Then when I get older, I'll settle down and, you know, I'll get serious about this stuff. Right? Because you may not get old. Right? You may not have tomorrow to start repenting of this stuff. Right? And so you need to start today. Verse 8, do not set your heart on dishonest wealth, for it will profit you nothing in the day of distress.
What about honesty?
Well, that was at the beginning. Remember, do not set your heart on your possessions?
Yeah.
Verse 9, do not winnow with every wind, and do not follow every road, for a double-tongued sinner is of such a kind. Right? There will be opportunities that come up in your life that it is better to let pass you by. Right? That's the do not follow every road. Right? Which is another opposite of all the graduation speeches I'm hearing lately, which is, you know, climb every mountain. Go out and try everything. Have all these experiences, right? No, there's some experiences you're better off not having. Right? As St. Paul says, everything's permissible, not everything is beneficial. Right? Yeah, you can go do whatever you want, but some of those things are going to end up destroying you. Verse 10, be established in your understanding and let your word be consistent. Be quick to listen and give your answer with patience. If you have understanding, answer your neighbor, but if not, let your hand be over your mouth. There is glory and dishonor in speech, and a man's tongue may cause him to fall. Do not be a slanderer, and do not lie in ambush with your tongue, for shame awaits a thief, and a grievous condemnation will come upon a double-tongued man. In a great or in a small matter, do not go wrong. This double-tongued man is talking about, this is what I was talking about a minute ago, this idea that you say one thing, especially in certain circles, and then you do another. Right? The reality is something very different. Chapter 6, verse 1, do not be an enemy instead of a friend, for a bad name brings shame and disgrace, and a double-tongued sinner is of such a kind. Do not exalt yourself with your own counsel, lest your soul be torn in pieces as by a bull. You will devour your leaves and lose your fruit and be left like a withered tree. An evil soul will destroy him who possesses it, and make him an object of malignant joy to his enemies. Pleasant speech will multiply his friends, and a gracious tongue will multiply many kind greetings. Let those who live at peace with you be many, but let your counselors be 1 in 1,000. That's what that's saying. Be friendly to everyone. Right? Live at peace with everyone. But in terms of people who you trust, who you're close with, be picky. Be picky. Why? Well, here's why. He's going to continue. If you gain a friend, gain him in testing, and do not be in a hurry to trust him. For there is a friend who is such to his own advantage, but he will not remain beside you in the day of your affliction. There is also a friend who changes into an enemy, and will reveal a quarrel to your disgrace. Again, there is a friend who is a companion at table, but will not stand by you in your day of trouble. Further, when you prosper, he will be like you and speak boldly to your servants. But if you are brought low, he will be against you, and will hide himself from your presence. Stay away from your enemies and hold on to your friends. A faithful friend is a strong shelter, and he who finds one finds a treasure. There is nothing that can take the place of a faithful friend, and there is no way to measure his worth. A faithful friend is a medicine of life, and those who fear the Lord will find him. He who fears the Lord guides his friendship rightly, because as he is, so also is his neighbor. All right, so you live at peace with everyone, but you test your friends before you make someone a friend, because there are a whole lot of people who are your friends when things are going good, as he says. And when things start going bad, all of a sudden, either they vanish or they turn into your enemy. Right? They turn on you. They're a friend for their own advantage. Right? You have something they want. Right? And all those things are to be separated from a true friend, which is a great thing. Verse 18, my son, from your youth up choose instruction, and you will find wisdom also into old age. Come to her as one who plows and sows, and wait expectantly for her good fruits. For in her work you will labor a little while, then you will quickly eat of her fruit. She is very harsh on the undisciplined, and on the one who lacks the heart to continue with her. She'll be like a heavy stone of trial upon him, and he will not delay to throw her off. For wisdom is like her name, and is not manifest to many. Listen, my son, and accept my judgment, and do not reject my advice. Put your feet into her fetters, and your neck into her collar. Put your shoulder under her, and carry her, and do not be angry with her bonds. Come to her with all your soul, and keep her ways with all your strength. Search for her and seek her out, and she will become known to you. And when you become self-controlled, do not let her go. For in the end you will find her rest, and she will turn to you in gladness. Then her fetters will be as a strong protection for you, and her collar a glorious robe. For there is a golden adornment upon her, and her bonds are a blue thread. You will wear her as a glorious robe, and put her on yourself as a crown of exceeding joy. Okay, so what's he talking about? Talking about putting on a collar and fetters, that's slavery. Right? Well, when you're young, and someone comes to you and tries to present to you the way God wants you to live your life, this path that leads to life, what does it seem like? Seems like slavery, right? To a whole bunch of rules, right? It seems like everything you want to do, right, isn't following those rules, right? They say when you're young, it's hard, right? It's like a heavy stone, right? It's like a heavy weight. It's like slavery. But then, as you grow older, and you start to see the results of living that way, right? You come of age and you gain wisdom, then you're glad. Right? Then those things that used to seem like chains and shackles seem like a beautiful robe, seem like nice clothes. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh, here's why. Right? You gain understanding. And so that's what he's aiming at there when he talks to his son. But if you start living that way when you're young, as difficult as it is, then when you get to old age, right, when you get older, you're already in that, right? You're walking that path and it becomes more natural. Right? This is why over and over again we see in Proverbs, raise up a child the way he should go. When he's old, he's depart from it. It's when we're young, right, that we're going out and doing the stupid things and making the mistakes, right? The consequences of which we have to deal with the rest of our life. Right? And if we can live right then, we've got a huge leg up right, on life and in the world. Verse 32, if you are willing, my son, you will be taught, and if you apply yourself, you will be prudent. If you love to listen, you will wait with anticipation, and if you incline your ear, you will be wise. Stand in an assembly of elders, and who is wise? Attach yourself to him. Desire to listen to every divine narrative, and do not let proverbs of understanding escape you. If you see a man who has understanding, rise early in the morning, and let your foot wear out the threshold of his door. Set your mind on the ordinances of the Lord and practice his commandments. He will strengthen your heart continually, and the desire for wisdom will be given to you. There he's talking about who to follow. Right? When we're young, who do we tend to follow after?
Cool guy.
Yeah, the cool guy. Whichever one of our peers is the most charismatic. Right? And has the coolest stuff, or seems to be the most awesome, has the best car, has the best looking girlfriend. Right? We say, I want to be like him. Right? We chase after those people and we get into all kinds of trouble. Here he's saying, no, go stand the elders, the older people. Stand and listen to them talk. Find one of them who seems to really have wisdom and understanding. Go follow him. Go follow him around and listen to him. Right? And that'll teach you the right path to go. Chapter 7. Do no evil things, and evil will never overtake you. Stay away from wrongdoing, and it will turn away from you. My son, do not sow on the furrows of wrongdoing, and you will not reap the same thing sevenfold. Do not seek authority from a lord, nor the seat of honor from a king. Do not declare yourself righteous before a lord, nor play the wise man before a king. Do not try to be a judge, if you will not be strong enough to remove wrongdoing, lest you respect the presence of the powerful and compromise your integrity. Do not sin against the population of a city, nor disgrace yourself before the people. What's that talking about? That's talking about, we all kind of want positions of authority, right? Nobody goes around saying, I'd really like to be a lackey. Right? I want to be a low-level minion. I want to go find a big company and work in the mailroom and be a cog in the machine who nobody knows my name, right? We never do that, right? We always want to be the CEO at least someday, or the president, or we want to go to business for ourselves and create some huge business, right? We want these positions of authority. And what he's saying is, with those positions of authority, there's a backside to it, right? That extra authority, that extra power comes with a whole lot of extra accountability. Right? When we try and prop ourselves up, it's a lot more accountability we have to deal with. That's why St. Paul says, not many of you should seek to be teachers. Right? Because at that time, again, in the church, everybody wanted to be the pastor. Right? Everybody wanted to be the teacher. Everybody wanted to be the preacher. He said, not many of you should, because you're going to be held accountable when it comes down to it. And that's what he's getting at here. Chapter 7, verse 8, do not repeat your sin, for you will not be unpunished even for one. Do not say, who will look upon the multitude of my gifts, and when I bring an offering to God Most High, he will accept it. That's that same idea he was getting at before, right? Where you just keep sitting and going about your business and thinking, well, I'm going to go and bring a big sacrifice and then that'll make up for it. I'm not going to actually change the way I live. I'm not going to try and stop sinning. I'm just going to, right? And there are certain people who have had that mindset throughout history. I'll pick on the Medici family, right? In Italy, right? They thought they could, have their rivals assassinated and, have all these intrigues and everything and step all over people to get rich. And then as long as they gave a bunch of that money to the church, right? That would make up for it, right? That would make up for it. In fact, in the Medici family private chapel, there's this, you can go and see it to this day, there's a fresco of a camel going through the eye of a needle. because they were wealthy, but they were pretty sure, apparently, that they were going to be saved anyway, right? Because they'd given all this money to the church. It doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way.
But the church took the money.
Well, yeah.
Then the Medicis to go to the church, didn't they become pope, pick the popes a couple of times?
A couple, yeah.
The Medicis that became.
Yeah. Okay. So verse 10, do not be faint-hearted in your prayer and do not neglect to do alms. Right? Well, now what's that talking about? See, that's talking about that struggling. Right? That we continue to pray, we continue to give alms, to do good, to repent. Verse 11, do not laugh at a man who is in bitterness of soul, for there is one who humbles and exalts. Do not devise a lie against your brother, nor do the same against a friend. Do not desire to tell any lie, for the habit of lying never does any good. Do not talk idly in the assembly of the elders, and do not repeat yourself in prayer. Yeah.
We had the same problem when we used the prayer book. Now, because we were repeating our prayers, and somebody said you were not using your own words.
Right, but let's take it in context. Right? Well, how does this passage start in verse 8? Do not repeat your sin.
Yes.
Right? And it ends with do not repeat yourself in prayer. Right? It's talking about the same thing. Right? He's saying, don't make it so that every time you pray you're having to confess the same thing because you haven't stopped doing it. Right? Every day I go and I'm a jerk to my wife, and then every night I say, oh God, please forgive me for being a jerk to my wife. And then the next day I get up and I'm a jerk to my wife. Right? Every day. That's what he's getting at. Right? That's what he's getting at. This idea that, again, you can't just keep living your life however you want to and then expect to say a prayer or give a gift, make a sacrifice, and then act like God's going to ignore it. The fact that you're not making any effort to live your life the correct way. Yeah. So do not laugh at a man who is in bitterness of soul, for there's one who humbles and exalts. Bitterness of soul is referring to someone who's repentant. Someone who's doing penance, who's really struggling. Right? Who's having a hard time spiritually. Right? Because, this is, you might think of the Pharisee and the publican. Right? The Pharisee thinks he's better than this publican, this sinner, who's over there pounding his chest and repenting. Right? Why? Well, because there's one, namely God, who humbles and exalts, who lifts people up and puts people down. Right? And so this person who's humbling himself now, who's going through this hard time, God is going to lift him up. And if you decide to lift yourself up over him, God's going to put you down. Right? That's the idea. Verse 15, do not hate hard work, especially farming, which was created by the Most High. I haven't done a lot of farming, but I do hate hard work. That's a confession. But the farming part, why does he mention that? Well, because already at this time, going all the way back in Genesis, remember? For example, when Abram and Lot, they went to divide the land, and Abraham said, well, you pick which part you want, and I'll take the other part. Which part did Lot pick?
Oh, the green one.
I want the part with all the cities.
Whatever.
Right? Sodom and Gomorrah and all that down there. I want the cities. I want the commerce. I want the right. And what part did Abraham take? He took the fields, right, where you could grow crops, where you could raise livestock, right. So there's going all the way back into Genesis. This constant sort of, who builds the first city in Genesis? Cain, right? After he goes and builds the first city. And so all the way through the scriptures, there's this sort of dubiousness of city life, right? Of sort of what goes on in a city, business dealings, that are iffy, the treachery, the lack of trust. Whereas when you look at Adam, what was Adam created to do by God? Farm. Tend the land. Right? Tend the land. What did Abel do? Raise livestock. Right? All the way through, sort of our good guys. Right? Tend to be more. David, right? Before he became a king, he was a shepherd boy. All of a sudden, when he goes into the city, becomes king, what happens? He starts getting into some trouble. So he's talking about this attitude that is, well, we're the city dwellers, right? We're wealthier, right? We're more cultured. Right? We're smarter. We're more intellectual, right? Those peasants, they go and do the hard work, especially the farming, going out and getting their dirty, right, out in the fields. We're somehow better than them, right? That's what he's talking about. He's condemning that attitude. Verse 16, do not number yourself among an assembly of sinners. Remember that wrath will not tarry long. Humble yourself greatly, for the punishment of the ungodly is fire and worms. Do not exchange a friend for money, nor a genuine brother for the gold of Ophir. Do not ignore a wise and good wife, for her grace is worth more than gold. Do not mistreat a servant who does his work in truth, nor a hired worker who devotes himself to you. Let your soul love an intelligent servant. Do not deprive him of his freedom. So these are all examples of that original attitude, right? This idea that we value things like gold and wealth and money more than things like friendship or our marriage or the people who work for us, who are devoted to us. Basically, that we value things more than people. Verse 22, do you have cattle? Take care of them. And if they are profitable to you, keep them. Right? So it starts with cattle. Right? You have cattle, you make your living with cattle. Obviously, you're going to take care of the cattle. Right? You're going to make sure they're healthy. That's your livelihood. That's where you make your money. Well, now going forward from that, do you have children? Correct them and make them obey from their youth. Right? If you're going to take your cattle that seriously, right? Because there's just your well-being. Should you take your children and their well-being more seriously? Right? Do you have daughters? Watch carefully over their chastity and do not be too easy on them. Because daughters are more valuable than cattle. Give a daughter in marriage and you will have completed a great work, but give her to a man of understanding. 26, do you have a wife after your own heart? Do not reject her, but do not trust yourself to a wife whom you disregard. Honor your father with all your heart, and do not forget the birth pangs of your mother. Remember that you were begotten through them, and what can you give back to them to the degree they gave you? So this is the flip side of that, right? You're so concerned about these cattle because that's your money, right? You're so concerned about your job. You're so concerned about your career, your occupation, right? Well, here's all these things that are more important. Your spouse, your children, your friends, your parents, the other people around you are so much more important. They should be your priority.
Excuse me, Father.
Yeah.
17, is he talking about when he says the ungodly, their punishment is fire and worms? Is he talking about hellfire?
Yeah.
They lived in hellfire?
Oh, at this point.
Oh, so when did it change?
At this point. Well, this is we're around 170 BC. So they have an idea, like we talked about, Christ talking about Gehenna, that there's this place of punishment. We're going to see in Revelation, it's the lake of fire. The idea that there's this place of punishment that's reserved, it was created, as we're told, and we're going to see that more when we get into the prophets. We'll talk about this more. It's created for Satan. It's created for the devil and for the demons. Right? But people who choose to follow them down this path essentially end up following them to their destination. Right? And so that's when we talk about this is the negative side. We talk, for example, the river of fire and God's judgment. Right? God's presence is fire. Fire can both make you warm, right? Give life. Fire can also destroy, depending on how you're set to receive it. And so, yeah, this is talking about saying, remember what the ultimate consequence. Remember where this road leads. Remember the destruction that's at the end of this. Right? Don't just look at, well, I'm going to have a lot of fun between here and here. Right? Remember what's here. Right? Remember what the end is. The end consequence. Verse 29. Fear the Lord with all your soul and honor his priests. Love him who made you and do not forsake his ministers. Fear the Lord and honor his priests and give them their portion as commanded. The first fruits, the trespass offering, the gift of the shoulder offering, the sacrifice of sanctification, and the first fruits of the holy things. Stretch forth your hand to the poor that your blessing may be complete. Notice they put together priests and the poor. There's a reason for this. We didn't get into this job for the money. But the things it's listing there, the gift of the shoulder offering, those things, those are all the pieces of the sacrifices that were supposed to go to the priests. They're supposed to go to the priests. So this shows that there was a certain temptation from some individuals to, give the portion that goes to God, and maybe skip out on giving the portion to the priests that rightly went to the priests. Right? So he's connecting those two. Well, why is that important? Not just out of my own self-interest. But the idea is, in our modern times, would be you can't claim to be following Christ and neglect his church. Right? You can't be right with God and not be right with his church. Right? Those two things go together. Right? You can't support one without supporting the other. It works that way. The church is the body of Christ. So you can't love him and not love his body. Right? And this has become much more popular in our current day, where you can go and order your communion kit for one now online and sit and read a prayer and have communion by yourself. Right? Yeah. At home. Right? And I don't know, but somebody very lonely.
Somebody who loves to make a buck of money on bread.
Yeah. But right, it misses the whole point. Right? This is the whole point. That we're believers together. We're Christ's body together. Right? That all of us were given to each other. And so it's not just love God and love your neighbor out in society, but it's also, in order to love Christ, you have to also love his church. And you have to support his church. Right? And whether we like it or not today, that includes monetarily. Because we're in a capitalist society.
I think you go further than when you talk about the church. I think we're, as Christians following the faith, must lift up one another in love and being charismatic at one time, as I understand that biblically, is to see Christ in the individual and act accordingly. So I can see, it's so easy to help members of the church. Oh, I know you, we sat in the same, sure. But it's the stranger that approaches
Right.
you that, you know.
Agreed. I don't think that's necessarily what we're talking about right here,
You're not.
but that's true. I think here it's aimed directly at the institutional church.
Is it?
Yeah. Because, I mean, it's talking about giving the shoulder of the sheep to the priest.
Well, yes, but that's what I meant with the charismatic thing, seeing who the priest is. I know the structural part of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, what you're saying is true. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm saying that the focus here is more on the church.
The
But
organized
ultimately,
church.
yes, it's to everyone. But the organized church is also important.
Okay.
It's also important. And especially in our modern American culture, we tend to demean the importance of the institutional church.
Yes.
Because we're very individualistic, right? It's about me and my relationship with Christ, right? And
this breaks
if
down.
I can find a group of Christians that I get along with, so be it. You know, if I can't, then I'll just go it alone, right? It doesn't work that way, right? You can't love Christ without also loving His church. Okay, so verse 32, stretch forth your hand to the poor that your blessing may be complete. Let the kindness of giving be shown in the presence of all the living, and do not withhold kindness from the dead. So the end of verse 33 there, just to put a little tag on it, right? Clearly we believe in the afterlife. This would be another one of those texts we look at when people want to talk to us about praying for the dead, offering bread and prayers and memorial for the dead, right? This is included there. Not only are we in this communion with the living, we're still in the communion with the saints, with the faithful who have gone before us, right? And so, just as we pray for one another who are alive, we pray for those who are quote unquote dead. Now we know from Christ that they're actually alive. In fact, in some ways, they're more alive than we are. But our prayers and our giving encompasses them too. Verse 35, do not hesitate to visit a sick man, for by such visits you will be loved. With all your words, remember the time you will die, and you will never sin. That's an important verse there right at the end. Right? If all the time we remember the fact that this life is finite, is going to have an end, and when it ends, we're going to stand before Christ and have to give an account for what we've done. If we really remembered that all the time, we wouldn't sin. Right? It's only when we forget that, start thinking about other things, what I want right now, you know, that's when we fall into sin. That's when we start making the wrong choices. Chapter 8. Do not contend sharply with a powerful man, lest you fall into his hands. Do not quarrel with a rich man, lest he resist your force. For gold has destroyed many and perverted the hearts of kings. Do not contend sharply with a talkative man, and do not heap wood on his fire. Do not jest with an uncultivated man, lest your forefathers be insulted. Do not insult a man who turns away from sin. Remember that we are all valuable. Do not dishonor a man in his old age, for some of us are growing old as well. I like that, some of us.
Unless your life is cut short.
Yeah. Well, that's the alternative. So think about that if you make fun of somebody for being old. You know, what your other option is. Verse 7, do not rejoice over any dead person. Remember that we all must die. Do not disregard a saying of the wise, but be conversant with their proverbs, because from them you will gain instruction and how to serve noble people. Do not miss a saying of the old, for they themselves learned from their fathers, because from them you will gain understanding and be able to give an answer in time of need. Do not kindle the coals of a sinner, for you may be burned by his flame. That's a good analogy. Right? If you see someone going the wrong path, don't encourage them. Right? Don't encourage them, because what does that encouragement do? It's like fanning the fire. And what happens? You get blowback. Right? Do not let the presence of an insolent man arouse you from your seat, lest he lie in wait as an ambush against your words. Do not lend to a man stronger than you, but if you do, consider it loss. Because you're not going to be able to collect. Right? Do not give surety beyond your ability to pay, but if you do give surety, be as careful as one who has to pay. That has something to say to us today in our day of easy credit. Right? That's what surety to pay is. That's taking out a line of credit. That's borrowing money.
That credit card.
Right. Right. He's saying, do not go running up your tab beyond what you can actually pay. And if for some reason you have to, if you get into a situation where you have to, then you need to treat it as if you have to pay that back. Meaning, don't walk away going, Verse 14, do not go to law against a judge, for they will decide for him because of his reputation. Do not travel on a journey with a reckless man, lest he weigh you down, for he will do his will, and you will perish with him in his folly. Do not cause a fight with an angry man, and do not go into a lonely place with him, because murder is as nothing in his eyes, and where there is no help he will strike you down. Do not consult with a fool, for he will not keep a matter confidential. Do nothing confidential in the presence of a stranger, for you do not know what he will give birth to. Do not open your heart to everyone, lest unkindness be shown to you. This is going back to that pick your friends carefully. Right? Pick your friends carefully. Because there are consequences to following and hanging out with and sorting with the wrong kind of people. Chapter 9. Do not be jealous of the wife of your bosom, and so teach her an evil lesson about yourself. Do not give your soul to a woman to let her trample on your strength. Do not meet with a woman who is a courtesan, that's prostitute, lest you fall into her snares. Do not associate with a dancing girl, lest you be caught in her schemes. Do not gaze at a virgin, lest you stumble and pay damages for her. Verse 5, does that remind you of anything? Remember when Christ says, he who looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery? All right, well, that's here. Don't even start looking. Right? Cut off sin way, way back. Right? Don't wait until you're about to sin and then try and stop. Don't even look. Don't even think about it.
Yeah, but
right?
Father,
and then you're not going to run into trouble.
Unless you're pure of heart.
Yeah, that's number one, and then number two is you are not pure of heart.
That's it. Yeah. Remember the sayings of the desert fathers.
Yeah. Don't even look at it. And then there won't be any temptation to do anything else. Verse 6, do not give your soul to prostitutes, lest you destroy your inheritance. Do not look around in the streets of a city, and do not wander about in its deserted sections. Right? That's not just saying you're going to get in trouble. That's don't go out looking for trouble. Right? Because trouble will find you. Verse 8, turn your eye away from a woman with a shapely figure, and do not gaze at beauty belonging to another. Many have been led astray by the beauty of a woman, and erotic love is like a burning fire. Johnny Cash did not invent.
Love is a burning flame.
Verse 9, never dine with another man's wife, and do not share in parties with her over wine, lest your soul turn aside to her, and you slip with your spirit and fall into destruction. Right, again, don't put yourself in situations where you're going to be tempted to do something. That's the first step in not sinning. Do as much as you can to get rid of the temptation. And this is something I say to people in confession all the time when they tell me they keep doing something over and over again. Right? If they tell me I'm out of control with what I'm eating, I say, you need to make those decisions when you're at the grocery store. Because if it's not in your freezer, you won't eat it. right? If it's not in your fridge, you won't eat it. When you're tempted in the middle of the night to go and binge eat, right? You're probably not going to get up at 2 in the morning, put on clothes, drive to Kroger, right? Buy something, drive back home and binge eat, right? But if it's sitting right there, right, you're going to have a lot of trouble, right? You're going to have a lot of trouble. Right? Or somebody comes and tells me they're looking at stuff they shouldn't look at in their computer. I say, put your computer in the middle of a public place where other people in the house can see you. Right? If someone's standing there watching you, you're going to be a lot less tempted, right? to click on something you shouldn't be clicking on. Right? You make the decisions beforehand, so that before you get up to the point where you have to decide whether to sin or not, before you get tempted. Right? And you'll have a lot better track record than if you go right up to it and then try and stop yourself. Right? And that's what he's saying here. Verse 10, do not forsake an old friend, for a new one is not equal with him. A new friend is like new wine. Drink it with pleasure only after it ages. This is more of that, be careful about who your friends are. Right? The guy who's just become your friend, you don't know yet. The guy who's been your friend for a long time, or the woman who's been your friend for a long time, this is someone you know, right, and should treasure. Do not envy the honor given a sinner, for you do not know what his end will be. Do not delight in the pleasure of the ungodly. Remember, they will not be declared righteous even in Hades. Keep far away from a man who has the power to kill, and you will not be anxious about the fear of death. But if you come near him, do not offend him, lest he take away your life. Know that you are stepping in the midst of snares and walking about the battlements of a city. Right? That's a more drastic example, but that's another way of saying, keep yourself away from danger, from temptation. Evaluate your neighbors as best you can and consult with those who are wise. Let your reasoning be with those who are wise, and let all your talk be about the law of the Most High. Let righteous men be your dinner companions, and let your boasting be in the fear of the Lord. A work will be praised for the skill of its craftsman, and a wise leader of people for the skill of his words. A talkative man is regarded with fear in his city, and a man who is reckless in his speech will be hated. That's another one of those on that theme. Sometimes it's better to not say anything. Chapter 10, a wise leader will educate his people, and the rule of an intelligent man will be well ordered. As goes the leader of a people, so also are his officials, and all the inhabitants of a city will reflect its ruler. An undisciplined king will ruin his people, but a city will be made habitable through the wisdom of its rulers. The authority of the earth is in the hand of the Lord, and he will raise up the right man for an appointed time. We talked about this idea before, that it's really God. The Wisdom of Solomon, we talked about this. Remember when he was sort of railing against Caesar, the newly crowned Caesar Augustus, who was claiming to be the Lord of the whole earth. Right? He was saying, well, no, God has the authority. Right? And if someone has some authority on earth, they got it from God. Right? For a time. For a period of time. And that's what Christ says to Pontius Pilate. You know, when Pontius Pilate says to him, don't you know I have the authority to set you free or have you killed? He says, well, you wouldn't have any authority if it wasn't given to you from above. And he didn't mean Caesar. Right. Verse 5, the success of a man is in the hand of the Lord, and he confers his honor upon the person of the scribe. Do not cherish anger against your neighbor for any injury, and do nothing by acts of insolence. Arrogance is hateful before God and man, and wrongdoing is offensive to both. Dominion is transferred from nation to nation because of wrongdoing, insolence, and wealth. Right? So, as we've gone through the Old Testament, how many nations have we gone through? Right? First Egypt, right? Then the Assyrian Empire, then the Babylonian Empire, then Alexander the Great comes and conquers everything. Then his generals are in charge, then Rome. Right? And now we know through the rest of it, Rome falls. Right? We go through all this. One nation comes to another. Right? Because why? Because nation comes to power, wrongdoing, insolence, and wealth. Right? They become arrogant. They become sinful. They become rich, so they stop stop caring about God and doing the right thing, and so God ends up laying them low and someone else comes to power in this cycle. Verse 9, how can he who is earth and ashes be arrogant? Because even while living, his insides are decaying. If you don't believe that while you're living your insides are decaying, ask a dentist. They'll tell you you've got a mouthful of decay going on.
Death begins after birth.
Yeah. Verse 10, a physician scoffs at a long illness, and a king today will also die tomorrow. When a man dies, he will inherit reptiles, wild animals, and worms. What does that mean? Well, that's what eats you. Right? After they bury you. Yeah, this whole part, I am earth and ashes. Yeah, this is all cited in the funeral service. The beginning of a man's arrogance is to depart from the Lord, for his heart withdraws from the one who created him. For the beginning of arrogance is sin, and he who takes hold of it will pour out an abomination. Therefore the Lord will bring them extraordinary distress and completely destroy them. Right? So that's the steps. Right? Sin, and then arrogance, and then destruction. Verse 14, the Lord pulls down the thrones of rulers and seats the gentle in their place. Oh, really?
Because the gentle is usually off the throne.
Well, unless you count Christ, who is seated in their place. The Lord plucks out the roots of nations and plants the humble in their place. The Lord overthrows the lands of the nations and destroys them to the foundations of the earth. He removes some of them and destroys them and puts an end to their memory on the earth. Arrogance was not created by mankind, nor fierce anger by the offspring of women.
Explain it.
That at the end, it's talking about that those things come from, it's referring to a tradition that's actually, if you want it in detail, you have to read 1 Enoch, which even though it's in the Ethiopian Orthodox Old Testament, we're not going to read here. Maybe when we finish the whole Bible, and I need something else to do a study on. We'll read 1 Enoch. I don't know. But 1 Enoch, it represents a whole body of Jewish literature. This tradition, it's about in Genesis, right? Beginning of Genesis 6, we read about the sons of God and the daughters of men. That's referring.
Chapter 3, verse 6.
That's referring to it too. This idea that when we look at Cain's genealogy that leads up to the flood, all the sort of arts and technology were created by Cain's descendants. After he builds the first city, right? There's metalsmithing and making music with various instruments, and all those things are in Cain's lineage. Well, the Jewish tradition is that those things were taught to them by demons, essentially, by fallen angels, and that's who the sons of God are that are being referred to in Genesis, who consorted with the daughters of men. That they learned all these things, and besides that, magic and the occult and and false worship and all this, that they got these from demons.
Well, when it
Right.
speaks of arrogance, are we talking about sin is arrogance because we do not know?
Right, sin brings about arrogance.
Rather than seeking Christ and His
Right.
wisdom, we are our own counsel.
Right, but what I'm getting to here is that it's referring ultimately to Satan and his fall. Right? Remember, the pattern was sin leads to arrogance, and then arrogance removes you from the presence of God. Right? That's exactly what happened with Satan. Right?
I would rather rule in one day.
In Milton, I'd rather rule in hell than serve in
1,000 days
heaven.
in heaven.
And so the idea is that same pattern happens with the rulers of the earth. Right? As what happened with Satan. God's the one who really has the authority and who raises them up and brings them down. But when they've been raised up, they tend to get arrogant. right? They tend to think they're great, and then they're humble. Same thing with Satan, right? He exalted himself up to the throne of God, and he got humbled. And we'll see a little more of this when we get into Ezekiel. Because when Ezekiel prophesies against the king of Tyre, there's part of his prophecy that's about the king of Tyre, and then there's part of it that's not really about the king of Tyre, that's talking about Satan and comparing the two. Right? Because at the time, the city of Tyre was considered this unconquerable city. It was the richest of the Phoenician cities. The king of Tyre thought he was pretty hot stuff. And Ezekiel basically prophesies how his city was going to be destroyed, and then it was destroyed by Alexander the Great not long after. So, but we'll get there at Ezekiel probably this time next year, maybe. Give or take. But that's what that's referring to. It's comparing those rulers to Satan and the demonic powers, who also thought they were great and were laid low. Verse 19, what kind of seed is honored? The seed of man. What kind of seed is honored? Those who fear the Lord. What kind of seed is dishonored? The seed of man. And what kind of seed is dishonored? Those who transgress the commandments. Among brothers their leader is honored, and those who fear the Lord are honored in his eyes. The fear of the Lord goes before the obtaining of authority, but roughness and pride is the losing thereof. The rich and the honored and the poor alike, their boasting is the fear of the Lord. It is not right to dishonor an intelligent poor man, nor is it proper to honor a sinful man. The nobleman, the judge, and the ruler will be honored, but none of them is greater than the one who fears the Lord. Free men will render service to a wise servant, and an understanding man will not grumble. So, this is saying, if you want authority, if you want to be honored, if that's what you're after, then the way to get there, to really get there, is to serve and follow the Lord. Right? So as he says at the end there, free men will render service to a wise servant. It's really a wise slave. Right? So they're saying somebody who's at the absolute bottom of the economic and social totem pole, a slave. If he has wisdom, right, free men who are way above him on the social scale will come and honor him because of his wisdom. Right? As we saw with, for example, Joseph in Genesis. Right? He's in prison, but he can interpret the Pharaoh's dream. So the Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth at the time, calls him this prisoner, right, this Hebrew prisoner, and comes and gives him all this honor because of the wisdom that God has given him. Verse 26, do not put your wisdom on display when you do your work, nor magnify yourself in the time of your trouble. Better is he who works and has plenty than he who magnifies himself but has no bread. My son, honor your soul with gentleness and give it honor according to its worth. Who will declare righteous the man who sins against his soul, and who will honor the man who dishonors his life? A poor man is honored for his knowledge, while a rich man is honored for his wealth. If a man is honored in poverty, how much more in wealth? And if a man is dishonored in wealth, how much more in poverty? Chapter 11, the wisdom of a humble man will exalt his head, and he will take his seat among the great. Do not praise a man for his good looks, and do not detest one because of his appearance. Right, so we just talked about wealth, right? Tend to respect, he's got a lot of money. And so we give honor and respect to that person rather than the person with wisdom. Now we're talking about personal appearance, which should be especially relevant to us today in the United States, because nowadays we've got people who are famous just for, looking pretty. They haven't. At least actors, act in movies. We have people now who are famous who don't even do that. Right? Yeah. So do not praise a man for his good looks, and do not detest one because of his appearance. The bee is small among winged creatures, but her fruit is first among sweet things. Right? A bee isn't very impressive looking. Right? But you look at what a bee produces, honey. Right? Especially this time, we don't have granulated sugar and corn syrup, right? It produces sweet honey. Do not boast about your fine clothes, nor magnify yourself in the day you are honored, because the works of the Lord are wondrous, and his works are hidden from men. Many tyrants have sat on the ground, but one never thought of has worn a crown. Many rulers have suffered exceeding disgrace, and honored men have been betrayed into the hands of others. Right? So, when it's talking about the works of the Lord, it's not talking about creation, it's talking about the works of the Lord inside us, producing what we would call today producing saints. Right? We see the outside appearance of people, we don't see what the Lord's doing inside them. Right? And oftentimes the holiest people are the ones we least suspect. Right? For example, Elder Sophroni said that he in his life had only met one person who had been given by God the gift of constant prayer. Meaning she was able to pray without ceasing. And it was a middle-aged Russian Orthodox woman living in Idaho who had 10 children. Not a nun somewhere in a convent. Right? Not a famous person, that's who God gave this amazing gift of prayer to. It was this woman with 10 children. Now with 10 children, I think she needed it.
Then there would be people who say, how does she have time to pray?
But she prays without ceasing because that's the gift that God has given her. So, it's not always, it's always where we least suspect it. And the Orthodox Church has always said that the saints that we recognize, that we have icons of, that we have troparia written for, are only a small percentage of the actual saints who have lived. But that because of our sinfulness, we're not able to recognize the rest of them. And so technically, we don't canonize saints. Right? Technically, we recognize saints. Right? God made them saints. We don't make them saints. Right? God made them saints. And we recognize it. We realize it. Right? Sometimes while they're alive, sometimes not till after they're dead, sometimes not till long after they're dead. Do we realize what God was doing? Chapter 11, verse 7. Do not find fault before you examine a situation. First understand it and then make your judgment. Do not answer before you have listened. And do not interrupt someone while he is talking. I think if Tricia were here, she'd make that her life verse. And then make a sign, cross stitch of it, and nail it to my forehead. But do not argue about a matter that does not concern you. And do not sit together with sinners when they judge a case. The first part of that rules out most of the internet. Do not argue about a matter that does not concern you. But verse 10, my son, do not let your business involve too many things. If you multiply them, you will not remain unpunished. And if you pursue them, you will not overtake them. And you will not escape by running away. Verse 11 explains that a little more. There's a man who works and keeps on working, but is in much more poverty. Right? We can put ourselves in sort of a hamster wheel, right, where we're chasing after things all the time. And we're always busy and we're always frantic, and we're never getting anywhere. Right? Because we're chasing after the wrong things, or we're chasing after too many things. Right? Chasing after things we don't need. Verse 12, there is another who is sluggish and in need of help, and he lacks strength and abounds in poverty. But the eyes of the Lord look upon him for his good, and restores his well-being from his humble state. He raises up his head, and many are amazed at this. Verse 14, good and bad, life and death, poverty and wealth, these are from the Lord. The gift of the Lord remains with the godly, and his approval brings prosperity forever. There is a man who grows rich because of his attention and restraint, and this is the portion of his reward. When he says, I have found rest, and now I will partake of my good things, yet he does not know how much time will pass until he will die and leave them behind to others. Again, does that sound familiar from a certain parable? Stand by your covenant and attend to it, and grow old in your work. Verse 19, do not be amazed at the works of a sinner, but trust in the Lord and remain at your work, because it is easy in the sight of the Lord to make a poor man rich quickly and unexpectedly. The blessing of the Lord is in the reward of a godly man, and in an instant he makes his blessings flourish. Do not say, what do I need and what good things will be mine in the future? Do not say, I am independent, from now on what will harm me? In the day of good things there is forgetfulness of bad things, and the day of bad things there is no remembrance of good things. Isn't that true? Right? We could have, got my health, right? I've got a place to live. I've obviously got plenty of food to eat, right? I have all these blessings that most of the people in the world can't dream of, right? But if I'm walking out to my car and I set my coffee on top of the car, I go to unlock the door and the coffee falls out and busts open, the coffee I paid $1 for at McDonald's, all of those blessings vanish, right? And it's like, why? Right? All of a sudden everything is horrible, right? Everything, my world is crashing down all around me, right? I'm having a horrible morning. I'm going to go and be grumpy at everyone. I'm going to yell at the dogs. I'm going to, right? Because all of a sudden the memory of all those good things vanishes, right? And so we have to fight this tendency. When we have the little bad things, we need to remember all the good things, right? We need to remember all the good things. Verse 24, for it is easy in the judgment of the Lord to reward a man on the day of his death according to his ways. The ill treatment of an hour makes one forget luxury, and at the end of a man's life there shall be a revelation of his works. Consider no man happy before his death, and a man will be known in his children. Those two are both kind of scary. But that first part is referred, consider no man happy before his death, is we tend to, as he said, do not envy the well-doing of sinners. We tend to look at people and say, well, look, this guy's done everything wrong from what I understand how we're supposed to live our life, and he seems to have everything. Right? Well, he's saying, wait till he's dead and gone, and then we can have a discussion. Because you don't know everything that's happening in his life and everything that will happen before the end. And you don't know what the judgment's going to be at the end. Verse 27, do not bring every man into your home, for the plots of the deceitful are many. The heart of an arrogant man is like a decoy partridge in a cage, and like a spy he watches for your fall. For he lies in wait and turns good into evil, and he will attach blame to the good one he chooses. From a spark of fire, a charcoal fire is kindled, and a sinful man lies in wait for bloodshed. Beware of an evildoer and his schemes, lest he bring lasting blame upon you. Receive a stranger into your home, and he will upset you with troubles and alienate your family from you. Now, that's not saying don't help strangers, right? We got to take it in the context of the whole thing. Again, this is in that theme of choose your friends carefully. Right? Choose your friends carefully. And so it's saying receive a stranger in your house, meaning make someone a friend without really knowing them. Right? Invite them to share in your life without really knowing who they are and what they're about and what they want, and it will have dire consequences. Chapter 12, if you show kindness, know to whom you show it, and you shall be thanked for your good deeds. Do good to a godly man, and you will be repaid, if not by him, then certainly by the Most High. There shall be no good things for him who continues in evil things, or for him who does not give alms cheerfully. Give to a godly man, but do not help the sinner. Do good to a humble man, but do not give to an ungodly man. Hold back his bread and do not give it to him, lest by it he lord it over you. For you will receive twice as much evil coming back for all the good you did for him. For the Most High also hates sinners and will render punishment on the ungodly. That continues in verse 7. Give to the good man, but do not help the sinner. A friend will not be revealed when you are prosperous, nor will an enemy hide himself when you are in adversity. Well, I'll stop there. So, this sounds pretty harsh, right? Only help someone if they're good. Well, what he's getting at is there is a way of quote unquote helping people, which isn't really helping them. Right? So I'm going to cite Plato. In Plato's Republic, they're debating what justice is. And so one of the people who's talking proposes, here's what justice is. Justice is giving every person what is theirs and what they deserve. Right? And so Socrates says to that guy, he says, okay, well, let's say I've borrowed my friend's sword. Right? It belongs to my friend, I've borrowed it. And he decides he wants to go and kill a man. Right? And he comes to me and tells me he's going to go murder this man and says he wants his sword back. Right? He says, well, it's his sword, right? So according to your definition, the right thing to do, the just thing to do, is give him his sword back because it belongs to him after all. Right? Knowing that he's going to go and take that sword and go kill someone. Right? So then, of course, the other person says, well, no, that's not what I meant. You know? Right? They go on arguing. But that's an example of a way of helping someone that isn't helping them. That isn't helping them, right? If someone is a drug addict and you go and you give them cash to go buy drugs, you're not helping them. Right? If someone is an alcoholic and you give them money to go buy alcohol, or you just give them alcohol, you're not helping them. Right? You're helping them, but you're not really helping them. Right? You're helping them continue in their sinful ways. And so this is saying you do not have to just do anything someone comes and asks you. Right? If just because someone comes and asks you for cash, you don't have to give them cash. Right? If they say they want money for food and you want to go buy them food, right? Buy them food. But if you know or have reason to suspect that they want cash for something else that's going to be more harmful than good, then you do something else. Right? That's what this is aiming at. This is not saying you should stand in judgment of people and decide who is good and who is bad and tell the bad people to buzz off and then help the good people. Right? It's saying you need to, when you help, make sure you're helping. Make sure you're actually doing good. Right? Make sure you're actually doing good for this person. Right? The person who, remember we talked about how when you at first blush, when we read the law, a lot of it seems pretty socialist, right? Because everybody gets an equal portion of the land, and every 50 years it all reverts, right? But you have to take into account, if you wanted to eat, you actually have to go and plant crops, right? You have to actually go and do the hard work of farming that land, or you're still not going to eat, right? It doesn't matter that God gave you that land. You're not going to have any food, right? And they were told, that they were to leave the outside portion of their fields unharvested so that the poor and widows and orphans could come and harvest it. Well, the poor and the widows and the orphans still had to come and harvest that grain, right? Remember when we read Ruth? She was a widow. Then she came back with all those bushels of, right? She was carrying 120 pounds of grain that she harvested, right? She still had to go and do that, right? So there's nothing here in the Old Testament that's telling us that if someone decides they just don't want to work and sit around, that it's our duty as Christians to continually give them handouts. Right? And let them just fester in their laziness and sinfulness. Right? In fact, that's not helping them. Right? That's not helping them. So that's not in the purview of when it says to help the poor. It means to help the poor. Right? It means to help the poor. Help them to better their lives. Right? So that's, we need to be careful that we don't, sometimes we too quickly jump from, right? We say, oh, well, God divided up the land equally, so we should divide up all the wealth in the country equally. Well, no, that's not what it says. Right? That's not what it says at all. It says everybody gets an equal starting point. Right? Everybody starts out equal. And the next generation starts out equal. Right? But what you do from there is what you do from there. Okay? And that's going to be important. It's going to be important to remember when we get into the prophets. Because a lot of what the prophets are going to attack is the way that the kings and the wealthy in Israel have taken all the wealth and abandoned the poor. Right? And the solution that the prophets are asking for is not for Robin Hood to come along and take all the money from the rich people and go and hand it out to the poor people. Well, that's not what the prophets are called. The prophets are saying you need to follow the law of God, right? These people you need to get rid of the generational poverty. You people who have land that should be theirs, you need to give it back to them so that they can work that land, put in their work and reap the reward from it. That's what they're talking about. So, again, we're going to get to the prophets next after this book. That's sort of a precursor of where a lot of that's going to go. We can't just jump from the agrarian economy based in farming that they had to our modern capitalist country and assume that everything works the same way. Okay. So we stopped at verse 9 of chapter 12. When a man prospers, his enemies are grieved, but when he is in adversity, even a friend will separate himself. Never trust your enemy, for as copper becomes rusty, so is his evil. Even if he acts humble and goes about with a humble posture, watch yourself and be on your guard. Then you shall be to him like him who wipes off a mirror, and you will know that it is not corroded continually. Do not let him stand by your side, lest he overthrow you and take your place. Do not seat him on your right, lest he seek your seat of honor. Then at last you will know the truth of my words, and because of my words you will be pierced with sorrow. Who will pity a snake charmer when he is bitten, or those who go near wild animals? Right? So if somebody wearing handling poison snakes and he gets bit, it's not a tragedy, right? You go, well, yeah, right? Or as horrible as it was when, who was it, Roy, who got attacked by the tiger? Right? As terrible as that was, well, it is a tiger, right? You know, they do that. Okay, so you expect that. Well, verse 14, so no one will pity one who approaches a sinful man and gets involved in his sins. Right? Same thing's true. Right? When you go and spend time with sinful people and all of a sudden, oh, you're getting involved in whatever they were doing, what did you think was going to happen? Right? What did you think was going to happen when you picked up the snake?
Amazing how many people lose friends when they sober up.
Yeah. Verse 15, he will stay with you for a while, but if you turn aside from him, he will not put up with you. An enemy speaks sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he will plan to throw you into a pit. An enemy will shed tears, but if he finds an opportunity, he will not be satisfied apart from the shedding of your blood. If evil comes upon you, you will find your enemy there ahead of you. And as he pretends to help you, he will pull your feet from under you. He will shake his head and applaud with his hands, and he will whisper many things and alter his expression. He'll put on a big show. Right? He'll put on a big show. Now, ultimately, again, we have to remember that our ultimate enemy isn't any human being. Right? Our ultimate enemy is Satan, is sin. Right? That's going to lead us down this path to destroy us. But isn't this true of him too, and of temptation? Right? When times are good, right? There's all these people around us, all this temptation around us. It seems so wonderful. It's so nice. Right? Everyone wants to be our friend. Everything is great. Right? And then all of a sudden when things turn around, right? All of a sudden it clears out. Right? All of a sudden there's nobody to help us out. All of a sudden there's nobody who's going to be our friend. I think we can get through chapter 13 real quick, then we'll stop. Chapter 13, whoever touches pitch will be stained, and whoever associates with an arrogant man will become like him. Do not lift a weight too heavy for you, nor associate with a man stronger and richer than you. What does a clay pot have in common with a copper kettle? For the clay pot will strike against the kettle and will itself be broken. A rich man does wrong and even proves himself to be the one wronged. A poor man is wronged and he must apologize. If you can be useful to him, a rich man will make use of you. But if you are in need, he will abandon you. If you own anything, he will live with you. And he will exhaust you, but will not feel sorry for you. When he needs you, he will deceive you and smile at you. And he will give you hope and say good things to you. He will even say, "What do you need?" He will shame you with his foods until he exhausts you 2 or 3 times. Then at last he will mock you. If he should see you after this, he will forsake you and shake his head over you. Take heed lest you be led astray and be humiliated in your folly. When a ruler invites you, be slow to accept, and he will invite you more often. Do not press upon him lest you be rejected, but do not withdraw at a distance lest you be forgotten. Do not intend to speak to him as an equal, and do not trust his abundance of words. For he will test you with a lot of talk, and while he is smiling, he will scrutinize you. He who does not guard your words is unmerciful, and he will not hesitate to harm or imprison you. Keep your words to yourself and be very careful, for you are walking near your own fall. Right? We're still in this category of choosing friends. Well, who are the people who we most want to have as friends? Wealthy people and powerful people, right? And what is Yeshua Ben-Sirach telling us here? Those are the most dangerous people to try to have as friends, right? People you think you want as your friends, right, are the most dangerous, right? They're the ones who are most capable of leading you into destruction, and then once you're in destruction, they walk away and shake their head and they never knew you. These are the last people we should be chasing after to be close to. Verse 14, every living creature loves its like, and every man his neighbor. All flesh gathers together by species, and every man clings to one like himself. What wolf will associate with a lamb? No more will the sinner with a godly man. What peace is there between a hyena and a dog? And what peace does a rich man have with a poor man? The prey of lions are wild asses in the wilderness. Similarly, the pastures of the rich are the poor. Pastures of the rich are the poor. Okay. So the idea here is one of 2 things is going to happen. Right? One of 2 things is going to happen. As we read in 13 verse 1, whoever touches pitch will be stained. Right? You touch it, your hand's going to be black by it. So either by hanging out with these people, you're going to become like them, you're going to become one of them, or you're going to be destroyed by them. They're going to prey upon you. Because if you're a righteous person, you're not like them. You're not like them. And one of the we've seen over and over again in Scripture, starting with Cain and Abel. St. John says in 1 John, the reason Cain killed Abel is because Abel's works were good and Cain's were evil. It's not just that, unfortunately, some people choose the wrong path. It's that once you choose the wrong path, the people on the right path become your enemy. Become your enemy. They'll do anything they can to destroy those people. Verse 19, lowness of stature is an abomination to the arrogant. Thus a poor man is an abomination to a rich man. When a rich man is shaken, he is strengthened by friends. But when a humble man falls, he is pushed away by friends. When a rich man falls, there are many to help him, and when he speaks abominable words, they justify him. If a humble man falls, they criticize him further, and when he speaks with intelligence, no place is given to him. When a rich man speaks, everyone is silent, and they exalt his word to the clouds. A poor man speaks, and they say, "Who is this man?" And if he stumbles, they push him down even further. Wealth in which there is no sin is good. We may need to repeat that. Right? Because, wealthy people don't do so good in the Bible. Right? But, again, wealth in which there is no sin is good. But poverty is evil in the mouth of an ungodly man. Right? So, there's not a one-to-one correlation. Right? Poverty doesn't automatically make you virtuous. right? 'Cause there are plenty of poor people who are unrighteous and who are sinful, right? And there are rich people who are righteous and who are just and are seeking to follow God, all right? It's just that there's not a one-to-one correlation the other way either. Meaning, being wealthy doesn't make you virtuous. And being poor doesn't necessarily make you unrighteous. Verse 24, the heart of a man changes the expression on his face, either for good or for evil. The mark of a heart filled with goodness is a cheerful face, but the invention of proverbs requires laborious reasoning. What does that last little bit have to do with anything? Right? Because, as we were just saying, there was this assumption. We saw this with Job and his friends, right? When Job was doing good and was wealthy, he was being blessed by God, and so he must be a righteous person, right? Then when he became poor and everything started going bad, well, he must have sinned horribly, right, for this to happen. Okay? So they have this idea that right, wealth and virtue, wealth and righteousness are the same thing. Right? Well, he's been attacking that pretty steadily, right, all the way through here. Wealth brings with it a lot of temptation, a lot of wickedness, right? A lot of temptation to arrogance. Right? So many of the poor are virtuous and righteous, and many of the wealthy are wicked. Right? And so this is what he's getting at in 24. The heart of a man changes the expression of his face, either for good or for evil. Right? Remember what we read a couple chapters ago. The works of God are unseen. Right? Works of God are unseen. What's going on inside the person is what makes them good or evil. Right? What makes them good or evil. Not how much money they have. Not how much money they have on the outside. So there are both wealthy, wicked people and wealthy, righteous people. There are both poor, righteous people and poor, wicked people. It has to do with their heart. It has to do with their heart. Right? And so, this last little bit is sort of the pin on it. It's talking about the cheerfulness on their face. Right? Being the mark of a good heart. Someone can be poor and be content and happy. Right? Because they're following God and they have a good heart. Someone can be wealthy, have all the wealth and power in the world, and be miserable. Right? Be miserable because they're on the way to destruction because they're far away from God. Because their sin has led to arrogance, and their arrogance has pulled them away from God, as he said a few chapters ago. Right? And so, happiness, blessedness, right, comes from having a good heart before God, not from wealth or power or any of these other things that we normally spend our time chasing after, that we labor and labor after and still remain in poverty, as he said, that hamster wheel. That's not where that comes from. It comes from having a good heart. Okay? So we'll stop there for tonight.